Close your eyes and picture your world. Mountains rise in the north. A ruined city sprawls across a scattered desert. There's a mist-covered isle no one dares sail toward. But when it comes time to draw it out, you freeze. Today on the Bearded Nerd podcast, I'm walking you through 10 simple steps to create a fantasy world map, from the first sketch to naming your regions and adding lore that begs to be explored without needing to be a cartographer. Whether you're a first-time GM or a veteran looking for a cleaner process, this is a beginner-friendly guide to making a functional, immersive map that actually helps you run the game. So, without further ado, let's dive into this episode of the Bearded Nerd podcast. Before we dive deeply into this, I just want to let you know I use Inkarnate because it's so user-friendly. The software is amazing. It is a desktop based program, so you don't necessarily have to download anything except your finished map. I use Inkarnate. You can use everything and anything else that you'd like, even a piece of paper and a pencil. But just as a disclaimer, I use Inkarnate. And that leads into the first part of it, why maps matter. You don't need it to be perfect, but in my opinion, a map gives your world a sense of physicality and scale, a natural conflict area, right? So mountains, rivers, and borders. Instant immersion for your players, and guidance for their travel, the politics, and the storytelling. One thing that I failed at as a GM starting out and in the more recent times is not finishing my world map. That was really hard for me because I'm not a cartographer. I suck at that design process. But after some knowledge sharing and some great conversations, I learned that it doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to feel real enough. A believable map doesn't come from artistic skill. It comes from logic and layers. So let's apply this process. Number one and step one, decide the scope. Ask yourself, are you making a continent, a country, a small island chain, whatever it is? Ask yourself that question and then zoom in. When you start big, you're able to zoom in and add more detail with fewer names, right? You can also reverse it, start small. You can always expand later. Maybe you only design a tavern. And then what's that tavern look like? Add all those elements. And then add, the city, right? Or the village. That tavern's got to be somewhere. Add that. And then add other layers. Okay, that village needs to be in a region. And then kind of grow from there. So think of it like a pyramid. Maybe you start at the top, really small, and expand down. Or maybe you start down and expand up, right? But that's number one. Decide the scope. Step two, sketch the basic landmass. Don't overthink it. Use blobs, rough shapes, or even, spill coffee and then trace over it. Spill all your dice and then trace over that. Keep the coastlines jagged and interesting. Don't round it and smooth it. Nature is beautiful, but it's also chaotic. Lean into that chaos. Step three, add mountains. Mountains typically shape travel, weather, the borders of different nations and cultures. Use the mountains to divide regions and use it to influence the river systems. Most rivers start in the mountains or the highlands and then flow towards the coast or lakes, not the other way around. Which leads into step four, adding rivers and lakes. Rivers shape trade and borders as well as mountains and settlements. People are going to settle near a river because it's a source of water. Lakes provide freshwater hubs as well. So by avoiding rivers that start at the coastline, don't do that. They almost never flow inland. And if they do, think of like the Carolinas, right? The Carolinas have intercoastal waterways. That would be an amazing example because that is rare enough, but it adds some depth. Step 5, add some biomes. place them using real logic. Deserts often sit behind mountains, rain shadows basically. Forests are near rivers and coasts in temperate zones. And then tundras are far from the equator or at high elevation. In this case, let geography help you define cultures. Cold climates often produce hardy survivalist people. That's where you are going to put your dwarves, hence the reason there's a stereotype around that. Jungle cultures also are survivalist, same thing with people living in the desert, but jungle cultures may rely on river transport or herbal lore as part of that world building component. Now from there, let nature and the regions there create the borders and the more political cultural zones, right? So divide your map into cultural or political zones using that nature. You can use the mountain ranges and rivers and things like that as quote unnatural or imaginary borders. You can even use magical borders from old wars and things like that. That would be a really cool concept, but use those things around the borders. Step 7. Place your major cities and capitals on the map. These cities should be near rivers, coastlines, or trade crossroads. Typically speaking, or at least historically speaking, major cities, big cities, right, grew from being around a river or a coastline or some sort of trade crossroads. I'll give you some examples. In the world of Game of Thrones in Westeros, King's Landing is by the coast. It allows for trade to occur. It allows for many things to happen to elevate the city. But more historically speaking, the city of Charlotte, the city of Raleigh, but specifically Charlotte, in North Carolina, here in the U.S., that was a trade crossroads between the indigenous people in the Carolinas and with the settlers, and therefore later on the colonialists and, so on and so forth. You get my drift. From there, rivers such as the River Thames in London, obviously London grew from that. Point is, these major cities grow from areas where you can access fish, you can access goods and services, but then more importantly, you can place a capital there. And one capital per region is a great start. You can even divide the regions based upon the species and races in your world and then place that capital there. I would personally make one city older, one city mysterious, and one city that maybe has fallen. It's clearly fallen. It's a ruin. It's an instant plot hook. Think of Minas Tirith. Think of Osgiliath, right? The city of Osgiliath has fallen many times. But in my own world, I have the city of Legalheim, which is a newer city. It's the capital of the southeastern section of human civilization. It is newer. It's more of a metropolis, and there are more progressive thoughts and processes in Legalheim than there is in Visdane, which is older. It's the oldest human city and settlement. Visdane is the capital of the Western human civilization. So add those things there and let the players fill it in. Step 8. Add the roads and trade routes from those cities and towns and villages. You can really just scatter villages and towns in between one city to another city, but you can just add roads and trade routes, which are more important to connect the cities through the caravan paths and things like that. You could add hazards like a sign that says bandit country or collapsed bridge or haunted ruins, right? Roads equal movement and movement equals adventure. Those hazards could be that combat encounter that you plan later down in the road. No pun intended. Step 9, name the things. Now you can start naming your regions, your oceans, the forests, cities. Not everything, You don't have to do the villages, right? You can use pretty much whatever naming conventions for different cultures, but just start naming things. For me, I have Legalheim, which I made it really simple. The city of Legalheim is the capital of the nation of Legalheim. And it's basically the lore behind that, which is step 10, but the lore justifies it. There's Garhadras, which is the elven realm. It's the elven region. The Suncrest Mountains, which are, the mountains, but the dwarven kingdoms of the Suncrest Mountains. That's kind of the generic title. There is the dwarven or Khazad name for it, and you can add those little bits to it, like the elvish name for XYZ, or you can use the common tongue for that name or region. For example, Gilfor, which, by the way, I use a lot of G's in my naming conventions, which will change eventually, but I use the Deepwood for the same region known as Gilfor. Gilfor is only known to the Wood Elves, but the Deepwood is what the humans call it because it is a vast wooded area. And ironically, it's also the place where the humans first met the elves and thought, oh, this is where all the elves live, right? So there's lore points that you can put, which leads to step 10. Add your lore. Add those kind of 1-2 sentence remarks for wooded areas or mountains or things like that. And then for cities, add, a paragraph, if not more. But again, that's based upon what you want to do. You can drop in other lore points, which is like a ruined fortress, and add why it's ruined. That could be a story hook or a landmark or a creature's lair or a forbidden island, right? Players love chasing what they can't immediately reach. I personally love doing this to add plot hooks and story hooks that are related to the characters. Now, let's move on to the last thing that I want to talk about, which are the maps and tools and those type of shortcuts. If you're going to use physical tools, all you need is like plain paper or hex paper, even like graph paper, right? A pencil. You could spill some coffee on the piece of paper, but I think that's a waste of good coffee. So instead, take all your dice, spill it on top of the paper, and then trace around it. Use colored pencils to create different terrain and different regions. But if you're going to use digital tools, you can use Wonder Draft, Dungeon Scroll, which is I think for like zoomed in areas, and then HexKit for region exploration. However, I specifically use Inkarnate. I love them. They're great people. They have been so awesome with me as a person, just like reaching out to them if I have questions. Their Discord community is amazing. They have amazing artists. Kate, who was on the podcast here a long time ago, is a cartographer that uses Inkarnate, which, by the way, you could hire her for that. Brian, who is another guest I've had on the podcast, is an artist that uses Inkarnate. I highly recommend Inkarnate. You could also hire someone to do this for you, but that does cost money, and I don't want you to stress over that. And if you're in a pinch, grab a map, whether it is a real-world map or a fantasy map, flip it, rotate it, and then just rename everything. You can borrow maps or see maps online. You can Google it for all I care. And take that and just work with that. It's okay. Do what works for you. Your map does not need to be beautiful. It just needs to spark adventure and be something tangible your players can see. Mountains can become kingdoms, rivers can become conflict zones, and one good road can lead to 20 sessions of play. So take these 10 steps, grab a pen or open up a map editor, and start sketching the world your players can't wait to explore. And if you want the World Map Starter Kit, complete with map templates, terrain tips, and naming prompt table, join me at the Guild Hall on Patreon. Until next time, y'all, be kind and compassionate to one another. And as always, folks, keep gaming.
you.